You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. I'm excited about this week. It's a newfound friend of mine that I met at VMX this year. Ivan, please go ahead and introduce today's guest.
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach. Very excited to introduce Janel Yun. What do we know about Janelle is that she has 20 plus years of entrepreneurship, coaching, and training expertise. Ms. Yun has served in various positions within the public and corporate sectors. She's a founder of Nava Pets. In 2014, she launched a pet TV, radio, and podcast show called Pet Owner's Diary. She's also an active volunteer and mentor in civic, church, and animal organizations. These organizations include, but are not limited to, the National Association Women Business Owners, Junior Achievement Florida State Minority Supplier Development Council, and Tiers of Seminole County and Orlando Pet Alliance. Janelle, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Well, thank you, Shawn and Ivan, for having me on.
So I want to open up with a little bit, with a little interesting story that I actually bumped into today. The topic for today's conversation is actually on pet parents versus pet owners and what is the difference. So I have a perfect story to start this because someone on the Slack channel in our company today posted this little video. I think it was from TikTok or something like that. And this is a Russian woman, and she stands next to the veterinary clinic somewhere, I think in Toronto or somewhere in Canada, and she says, "I bought my dog for $1,000 somewhere in Russia, and to clean dog's teeth is $750." It was interesting to me because I said that's because some people look at their pets as objects. They don't think, like, it doesn't matter how much you. It's not, you're not comparing a bought a car or RV for 30 grand and now it's 29 to fix it. It's just I don't think that's the case. But it was so profound, and I'm so glad that we have this topic. So, pet parents versus pet owners, why it matters, and what is the difference, Janelle?
So I'm glad you brought up that illustration because that is absolutely perfect. When you look at how our relationship with pets have evolved, I remember growing up, most of your pets stayed outside and they were considered objects. Spending $1,000 for me for a pet. Most people that do know me, I have a strong stand on adoption,
Of course. Yeah.
especially here in the US. It's really, really bad. And a lot of people are taking note to that. And we've seen, especially with COVID-19, a huge explosion of people adopting pets. And so there is a difference. We find that probably within the last 20 years, the family unit has evolved, right? It has so many different names, so many different extensions. And so we're seeing that pets aren't any different. We finding that pets are part of the village, right? Because I remember growing up, it takes a village to raise a family. And so we're seeing that in so many different facets. So a pet owner usually sees their pet, for example, as an object. They usually have some sort of strict function. We see that a lot, like with people who are farming or people that do what I call classic traditional labor, like fishing, hunting. And usually, those, even though they have some sort of bond, that particular pet is there to do that function. A pet parent is someone where they are literally see that pet as their family. And so to pay $750, and believe me, that's about right, for a cleaning, is just part of the expense that you pay in maintaining your fur baby. Or I've seen people say fur child, or they just say my child, because clearly that's an expense like you would pay for a human child, them getting their teeth cleaned, getting braces, for example. So you're finding that we're constantly pushing the envelope on that, and it's really taken a life onto its own self. And we see how that's even changed within the industry and the market, right? A lot of innovation that we're seeing, it's because people really want to have that constant connection with their pets. We see that even with veterinarians, it's just not enough to take the vet's word. We want to know everything about our pet. What's the profile? What is their breed? What is their DNA? What we also are more keen on to hereditary diseases, viruses. And so lots of that didn't evolve 20 years ago. It was just like, you kind of fed your dog or cat what you ate on the table. Now we have, for example, prescription food. Who would have thought something as simple like that has evolved to this point now?
That totally makes sense. And, I was just thinking as you were talking about the pet having a function, if you think about the police dogs, I worked with a
Hmm.
lot of police dogs in several jurisdictions. I mean, those dogs do have a function, but that's their partner. I mean, the way they value the dog that they work with is incredible. I probably can say that out of all parents, pet parents that I met, police officers, I think the most attached to those, working dogs, if you will, but they love them to death. Like this is just an incredible bond that they build through it. And the interesting statistics that I was going through. So last year, I was analyzing a lot of sort of development of the pet industry, and absolutely, this sort of phenomena of what they call humanization of the pet is another factor that doesn't exist, let's say, in the human healthcare and the driver behind the economies. So let's say in human healthcare, we're discovering more ways to treat things, more ways to diagnose things. So the industry is growing through innovation. But what happens in the pet industry is that not only the number of pets now increased, and COVID helped a lot with that, but also the degree of how much we love our pets. And when I was at IDEX, it was interesting statistics that we followed, for example, to measure humanization of the pet. And I was, first I thought it was funny, but then it made all logic in the world to me. Because as you said, people usually had dogs outside. Right now, people have dogs in their bed and they sleep with them. So that was one of the measure and the statistics, how many people sleep with their dog and how many people celebrate their pet's birthday. How many people celebrate Valentine? There's tons of people that, make a little cute present to their dog. So, and those things were kind of surveyed and monitored. And the more pets are getting that kind of treatment, the more the industry is growing, and we absolutely should pay attention. So I think that this is a great topic. So can you maybe expand on why the voice of those pet parents is so important for, development of the pet industry, and what will happen if we're not going to listen to them?
Oh, that's a very good question. So, all of those examples that you've described is what being a pet parent is all about. And you're finding it's not isolated cases. I really believe, for example, the millennials help push that because right now they are the largest pet owner group. People that are Generation X, like myself, we've been surpassed. Every survey is different. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that people are getting married or in committed relationships a lot older. I think the access to availability of getting a pet now more than ever is really easy. I also find that there's so many added benefits, and people see that with having a companion pet, and part of that is a lot how you were raised, right? A lot of people that I talk to, or even when I interview on my podcast, we all have that common theme that we grew up with pets. And then there's people that I find that they didn't grow up with pets, but maybe their spouse or significant other did. And so it's kind of just like this phenomenon that is just so infectious. And I feel that people use that, and it's become somewhat to some degree a replacement for humans. And that is something that's not going away. And to answer your question, if people or products or the industry doesn't pay attention, then what it is, it'll just open other doors for people who can think outside the box and people will come. This is not going away. If anything, it's becoming more larger. One of the things I often try to talk to people about, even within the business world, is that the pet industry is huge. It comes in so many different channels. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, but yet we're not treated with the same respect like beauty or makeup or apparel businesses, right? How many businesses or industries are really recession proof? because the products that we provide for our pets are essential, like food and treats. And so I'm constantly talking to people about that. And the reason why people get it with being a pet parent is because for some people, that's all they want to do. And we're finding that more and more as you have empty nesters, as you have people who decide they don't want to have children, or someone like myself, independent, single woman. I mean, you just think, hey, as long as I got my pet, I'm fine. So, I mean, there's always that kind of feeling that we feel like we need to nurture or take care of someone, and pets are just like a easily transition to doing that, right? They're very loyal, they love you unconditionally, and their needs are quite minimal. I find it fascinating how we all around the world have a lot of similarities, but at the same time we're culturally we were different. I remember I was watching an episode and they were talking about the Japanese culture and what they do with their pets and compared to like the US. And I find that they take it to like a whole new level. I mean, like you wouldn't even be caught outside with your dog in a stroller or having clothes from head to toe. And that just like totally blew my mind because I know we have apparel here, but not to the extent with them. I mean, they really have a higher level of socialization and community about the pets, and it's always the same. There's no thought about cost or procedures. As long as that cat or that dog is looking good, that's all that matters.
It's really interesting, Janelle. This kind of transition away from ownership or kind of functional tool or functional, animal to, being part of the family. I think the transition from owner to pet parent is a really interesting transition. And so you've been having lots of conversations with pet owners back, I'm sure even before 2014. What trends are you seeing in that owner group that might help people that listen to our show, whether it's a veterinarians, connect in a more authentic way with those pet parents around those precious babies?
Very good question. So, one of the things I find is on a veterinarian side, people that are pet parents, they consider that person as an extended connection, right? It's not, it's my vet, it's my dog's doctor or my cat's doctor, right? I think veterinarians need to hone in on that and becoming more personal, becoming more relationship oriented when you're talking to people who consider themselves pet parents. Sometimes, in even my own experience, a veterinarian can be a little bit disconnected, and it may be a lot because they do see patients in and out. But when you're talking to that pet parent, that's all they see. They're not thinking about your caseload for the day. They're thinking, okay, Fluffy is sick. I've done everything I can do. I really need you to help. Because one thing that the person's looking for is that acknowledgement that you understand that that is their pet child or fur baby. And then secondly, that you can relate to them and say like everything is going to be okay, just as if you would take a child or, your grandmother or your mother or father to the hospital ER. Like for example, I had one of my staff persons, her dog got into some chocolate and she totally freaked out because, as many of you know, chocolate is poisonous for dogs. And so she hurried up and went to the ER, but I knew the importance of that. So I made sure to talk with her through the process, encouraging her, letting her know that everything's going to be okay and that, some of the signs that your dog is doing, he's going to be all right. Those are just like little tips that even though she was distraught and she was telling me they had to put her into a private exam room because she was so distraught, that kind of emotion is so powerful. And I think vets and other people in the industry need to pick up that, right? We need to pick up that with the products we sell. We need to pick up that with the services that we provide, whether you do it on the veterinarian side or the consumer side. All of that resonates with them and it's so real. And if you're not able to get that, you're losing your customer base.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I think that it's so interesting when you said about its extension of your sort of that's my animal doctor. The other things that, while in practice, I remember talking to physicians, and it sort of struck me. They were saying, "Well, how much more difficult?" And we're just comparing what do we do at
Mm-hmm.
work, and it was interesting because I can compare the work that we do as veterinarians. It's almost like pediatrics, because when you're an adult, you can go into the doctor's office and say, I feel nauseous, it hurts here. You can explain your pain. When you have a toddler or even a newborn, they just cry, and then there's no really explanation, and you need to find out with through imaging, blood work, and diagnostics and physical exam what's wrong with the pet. So I had that comparison sort of in my mind, but also I love John Ayers, previous CEO of IDEX, comment about blood work. He said that blood work, it gives pets a voice, so you can actually understand what's going on with their body. And I think in that sort of perspective, to me, I'm sometimes thinking that veterinarian is sort of the translator or interpreter for the pet owners of what's going on with their pet, because pets sometimes just not feeling well, and owners feel it immediately because it is like your child, and that the pet is under the weather, but you don't know why. So that's where that trust comes from. When you're coming for advice and finding out what's wrong with my baby, that's a very strong connection, and I think that's the role that we play in this relationship. So I think there's a lot to this sort of extension of your family, and sort of this person that helps you communicate with the pet. But with that, I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit and ask you more about the Pet Owner Diary and what it is about, and if you can share with the listeners what's usually going on in that TV, radio, and podcast, so they can actually peek and understand what they can learn from there.
Sure, and thank you for allowing me to talk about it. I started it in 2020 during the time of COVID. I found that it hit so many pet families hard, and that there really was a limited amount of media channels that allow people to kind of hear stories that they could relate to, finding that, look, I'm not by myself, even though I may be by myself in my own place. I have my pet, but wow, I can hear something, or I can call in and talk in. So I saw Pet Owner Diary as like a multimedia diary or journal to really see what's inside of what pet people do, right? Because it's still a little bit mysterious. I mean, we all get that we go to a vet, or you go to your local pet shop or pet boutique retailer, and we get all that, right? Because we see that, but we really don't have that intimacy of conversation. And there are some podcasts and stuff, but really for me, it was about educating pet parents. Why are you a pet parent? What is the expectations? And also giving people an opportunity to see what else is going on in the community. And so we've had very good response on the radio show here, based in Florida, and then also on our podcast. So I find it to be very fun for me, in the sense that my background, especially within the pet industry, has been with consumer products, not only on the retail side, but also on the manufacturing. So this is kind of like refreshing, because I love just talking with people. I love having that interaction, and pets are like a no-brainer, right? Because we just speak our own language. So I feel like the channels that I provide allow me to do that. And it's kind of funny because um, a lot of the places that I've gone that we're producing right now with our pilot is places that I've never even been to. And the fact that people are so open, it's really interesting. So, like last week, I went up to Daytona Beach, and I met a lady who a lot of people wouldn't even know that, she just finished battling cancer, but her primary focus was how to teach pet parents or owners the same type of strategies she used in training dolphins, and how that's more effective in treating dogs and having that communication. So it's really about those personal stories that really impact your life. And I just feel that I'm just a vessel in sharing that to others.
That's amazing. Well, Janelle, it was a quick 20 minutes, like it always is on our show. So thanks for joining us. So we like to wrap up the same way with every episode. So the first question we ask is, what's an inspiring TED Talk, YouTube video, a book, maybe a journal, something that you've read that you've really kind of enjoyed in the last little bit?
So I definitely I'm still immersed with pet media. So I would tell people to check out Netflix. They have a couple shows that are really pet focused. And so my favorites have been the series called Dogs. It's really inspirational. And so those that are dog owners, or maybe you're not, that is really something you may want to catch. And for those people that are about cats, they just launched a new one called Cat People, which I find it to be quite hilarious. So.
Awesome. And then the last question that we usually ask, is there anybody in the industry that you think would be a good fit as a guest for this podcast?
That's a good question. I would say I would love to hear a little bit more. There's a new nonprofit organization. It's called the Purple Leash Project. And what it is it brings focus that there's only less than 15% of shelters for domestic violence victims that are pet friendly. And so Purina recently teamed up, the nonprofit is called Red Rover. So I think they would be a perfect guest because that's a topic that we don't really talk about much. And to see how pets are making strides with those particular victims because they tend to hide behind their pain, hide behind their bruises. To see that there's some efforts being made that they can be pet friendly and that they have to make that choice whether to go to a safe place or they can't because they can't bring their pet, which I'm sure provides such strong emotional support. I want to say kudos for them.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.